Good morning, a very warm welcome to today's study of Psalm 34. May our thoughts, our words and our deeds be forever acceptable in your sight. O Lord, our sheltering rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Psalm 34. I will praise the Lord at all times. My mouth will continually praise him. I will boast in the Lord. Let the oppressed hear and rejoice. Magnify the Lord with me. Let us praise his name together. I sought the Lord's help, and he answers me. He delivered me from all my fears. Look to him and be radiant. Do not let your faces be ashamed. This oppressed man cried out, and the Lord heard. He saved him from all his troubles. The Lord's angel camps around the Lord's loyal followers and delivers them. Taste and see that the Lord is good. How blessed is the one who takes shelter in him. Fear the Lord, you chosen people of his, for those who fear him lack nothing. Even young lions sometimes lack food and are hungry, but those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. Come, children, listen to me. I will teach you what it means to fear the Lord. Do you want to really live? Would you love to live a long and happy life? Then make sure you don't speak evil words or use deceptive speech. Turn away from evil and do what is right. Strive for peace. Promote it. The Lord pays attention to the godly and hears their cry for help. But the Lord opposes evildoers and wipes out all memory of them from the earth. The godly cry out, and the Lord hears. He saves them from all their troubles. The Lord is near the brokenhearted. He delivers those who are discouraged. The godly face many dangers, but the Lord saves them from each one of them. He protects all his bones, not one of them is broken. Evil people self-destruct. Those who hate the godly are punished. The Lord rescues his servants. All who take shelter in him escape punishment. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. The occasion of this psalm, according to the superscription, was that humiliating and questionable episode when David pretended insanity to save his life from the ruler of Goliath's city of Gath. The set of critical opinions sweeps away this tradition as unworthy of serious refutation. The psalm is acrostic and therefore of late date, and there are no references to the supposed occasion. The careless scribe has blundered blindly around in the king's name, it would appear, mixing up stories about Abraham and Isaac in Genesis with the legend of David at Gath. But the assumptions that acrostic structure is necessarily a mark of late date is not necessarily true, and needs more proof than we have here. And the absence of plain allusions to the singer's circumstances could be taken in either way, suggesting the question, how the attribution to the period stated arose, since there is absolutely nothing in the psalm to suggest this. The blunder of the king's name is perhaps not a blunder after all, but as the Genesis passages seem to imply, Abimelech, the father of the king, may be a title, like Pharaoh, common to Philistine kings, and Achish may have been the name of the reigning Abimelech. The proverbial style and somewhat slight connection and progress of thought are necessary results of acrostic letters. If the psalm is indeed of David, the contrast between the degrading expedient which saved him and the exalted sentiments here is remarkable but not incredible. The seeming idiot scrabbling on the gate is now saint, poet and preacher, and looking back on the deliverance won by a trick, he thinks of it as an instance of Jehovah's answer to prayer. It is perhaps a strange psychological study, and yet, keeping in view the then existing standard of morality as to stratagems in warfare, and the wonderful power that even good men have of ignoring flaws in their faith and faults in their behaviour, we may venture to suppose that the event which evoked this song of thanksgiving, and is transfigured in verse 4, is the escape by craft from Achish. To David, his feigning madness did not seem inconsistent with trust and prayer. Whatever the occasion of our psalm today, its course of thought is obvious. There is at first a vow of praise in which others are summoned to unite, verse 13. Then follows a section in which personal experience and invocation to others are similarly blended. Verses 4 to 10. And finally, a purely didactic section, analysing the practical manifestations of the fear of the Lord, and enforcing it by the familiar contrast of the blessedness, of the righteousness, and the miserable fate of the ungodly. Throughout, we find similar turns of thought and expression, such as are usual in acrostic psalms. The glad vow of unbroken praise and undivided trust, with which the psalm begins, sounds like the welling over of a heart for recent mercy. It seems easy and natural, while the glow of fresh blessings is felt, to rejoice in the Lord always, and again to say, rejoice. Thankfulness, which looks forward to its own cessation, and takes into account the distractions of the circumstance and changes of mood which will surely come, is too foreseeing. Whether the vow be kept or not, it is well that it should be made. Clearly, still better is that it should be kept, as it may be, even amid distracting circumstances and changing moods. The incense on the altar did not flame throughout the day, but being fanned into a glow at morning and evening sacrifice, it smouldered with a single thread of fragrant smoke continually. It is not only the exigencies of the acrostic which determine the order in verse 2. In Jehovah shall my soul boast, in him, and not in self or worldly ground of trust or glory. The idea of the devout life, which in moments of exaltation seems capable of realization, as in clear weather, alpine summits look near enough to be reached within an hour, is unbroken praise indeed, and undivided reliance on and joy in Jehovah. But alas, how far above us are the peaks! Still to see them ennobles, and to strive to reach them secures a continuing steady progress. The solitary heart hungers for sympathy in its joy, as in its sorrow, but knows full well that such can only be given by those who have known like bitterness and have learnt submission in the same way. We need to be purged of self in order to be glad in another's deliverance. We must be pupils in the same school in order to be entitled to take his experience as our encouragement, and to make a chorus to his solo of thanksgiving. The invocation is so natural an expression of the instinctive desire for companionship in praise that one need look no further than any particular group to whom it is addressed. But if the psalm is David's, the call is not appropriate in the mouth of the leader of his band of devoted followers. The second section of the psalm, verses 4 to 10, is at first biographical and then generalizes personal experience into broad, universal truth. But even in recounting what happened to himself, the singer will not eat his morsel alone, but is glad to be able at every turn to feel that he has companions in his happy experience. Verses 4 and 5 are a pair, as are verses 6 and 7, and in each the same fact is told, first in reference to the single soul, and then in regard to all the servants of Jehovah. This poor man is by most older preachers taken to be the psalmist, but today the majority of preachers suppose this to be an individualizing way of saying poor men. The former explanation is perhaps more natural, as preserving the parallelism between the two groups of verses. If so, the close correspondence between the two groups of verses, 4 and 6, can be explained, since the same event is the subject of both. In both verses, we have the psalmist's appeal to Jehovah presented, in the one as seeking with anxious eagerness, and in the other as crying with a loud call of one in urgent need of immediate rescue. In both cases, divine acceptance follows close upon the cry, and in both immediately comes succour. He delivered me from all my fears and saved him from all his troubles, correspond entirely, though perhaps not verbally. In the same way, verses 5 and 7 are alike, extending the blessing of the unit, so as to embrace the class. The absence of any expressed subject of the verb in verse 5 makes the statement more comprehensive, like the French on, or in the English they. To look to him is the same thing as expressed in the individualizing verses by the two phrases sought and cried to, with only the metaphor being changed into that of silent, wistful directing of beseeching and sad eyes to God. Its issue is beautifully told in pursuance of the metaphor. Whoever turns his face to Jehovah will receive reflected brightness on his face. Like when a mirror is directed sunward, the dark surface will flash to sudden glory. Weary eyes will gleam. Faces turned to the sun are sure to be radiant. The hypothesis of the Davidic authorship gives special force to the great assurance of verse 7. The fugitive in his rude shelter in the cave of Adullam thinks of Jacob, who in his hour of defenceless need was heartened by the vision of the angel encamped surrounding his own little band, and named the place Mahanaim, the two camps. That fleeting vision was a temporary manifestation of an abiding reality. For wherever there is a camp of those who fear God, there is another, of which the helmeted and sworded angel that appeared to Joshua is captain, and the name of every such place is two camps. That is the sight which brightens the eye that looks to God. The mysterious personality, the angel of the Lord, is only mentioned in the Psalter here and in Psalm 35. In other places, he appears as the agent of divine communication, especially as the guide and champion of Israel. He is the angel of God's face, the personal revealer of his presence and nature. His functions correspond to those of the Word in St. John's Gospel, and these, joined with the supremacy indicated in his name, suggest that the angel of the Lord, is in fact the everlasting Son of the Father, through whom the teaching of the New Testament is that all revelation has been meditated. The psalmist did not know the full force of the name, but he believed that there was such a person, in an eminent and singular sense, God's messenger, who would cast his protection around the Devite and bid inferior heavenly beings to draw their impregnable ranks about them. Christians can tell more than he could of the bearer of the name. It becomes them to all be surer of his protection. Just as the vow we find in verse 1 passed into invocation, so does the personal experience of verses 4 to 7 glide onward into exhortation. If such be the experience of poor men trusting in Jehovah, how should the sharers in it be able to withhold themselves from calling on others to take part in their joy? The depths of a man's religion may be roughly, but on the whole fairly, tested by his irrepressible impulse to bring other men to the fountain from which he has drunk. Very significantly does the psalm call on men to taste and see, for in religion experience must precede knowledge. The way to taste is to trust or to take refuge in Jehovah. The psalm set it before him, just as the act of appealing to Jehovah was described in a threefold way in verses 4 to 6. So a threefold designation of the devout man occurs in verses 8 to 10. They trust, are saints. They seek. Faith, consecration, and aspiration are their marks. These are the essentials of the religious life, whatever the degree of revelation there may have been. These were its consequent, so in the psalmist's time, and so they are today. As abiding as they are the blessings. They will be summed up in one, the satisfaction of every need and desire. There are two ways of seeking satisfaction: that of effort, violence, and reliance on one's own teeth and claws to get one's meat. The other of patient, submissive trust. Were there lions prowling around the camp at Adullam? Did the psalmist take their growls as typical of all vain attempts to satisfy the soul? Struggle and force and self-reliant efforts leave you gaunt and hungry. He who takes the path of trust and has his supreme desires set on God, who looks to him to give what he himself cannot wring out of life, will get first his deepest desires answered in possessing God, and then will find that the one great good is an encyclopedia of separate goods. They that seek Jehovah shall most assuredly find him, and in him everything. He is multiform, and his goodness takes many shapes, according to the curves of the vessels which it fills. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added to you. The mention of the fear of the Lord prepares the way for the transition to the third part of our psalm. It is purely didactic, and in its simple moral teaching and familiar contrast of the fates of righteous and ungodly, has affinities with the book of Proverbs. But these are not so special as to require the supposition of contemporaneousness. It is unfashionable today to include the Davidic authorship, but would not the supposition that the children who are to be taught the elements of religion are no more or no less than the band of outlaws who had gathered around the fugitive? Does this not give appropriateness from the transition from the thanksgiving of the first part to the didactic of the second? we can see them sitting around the singer in the half-darkness of the cave, a wild group needing much control, and yet with faithful hearts and loyal to their leader, who now tells them the laws of his camp, at the same time setting out the broad principles of that morality, which is the garment of men of the fear of the Lord. The relations of religion and morals were never more clearly and strikingly expressed than in the simple language of this psalm, which puts the substance of many profound treatises into a nutshell, when it expounds upon the fear of Jehovah as consisting in speaking truth, doing good, abhorring evil, and seeking peace, even when it seems to flee from us. The primal virtues are the same for all ages and stages of revelation. The definition of good and evil may vary and become more spiritual and inward, but the dictum that it is good to love and do good shines unalterably. The psalmist's belief that doing good was a sure way to enjoy good was a commonplace of traditional Old Testament teaching, and under a theocracy was more distinctly verified by outward facts than perhaps today. But even then, as many psalms show, had exceptions so stark as to so many doubts. Unquestionably, good in the sense of blessedness is inseparable from the good in the sense of righteousness, as evil which is suffering is from evil which is sin. But the conception of what constitutes blessedness and sorrow must be modified so as to show most weight on inward experience, if such necessary coincidence is to be maintained in the face of the obvious fact. The psalmist closes his psalm with a bold statement of the general principle that goodness is blessedness and wickedness is wretchedness. But he finds his proof in the contrasted relationship with Jehovah, involved in the two opposite moral conditions. The loving kindness of Jehovah is, in his view, prosperity, whatever be the aspect of the external. So with bold symbols, the very grossness of the letter which shields them from misinterpretation, he declares this as the secret of all blessedness, that Jehovah's eyes are upon the righteous and his ears are open to their cry. The individual experiences of verses 4 and 6 are generalized. The eye of God, in other words, his loving observance, rests upon and blesses those whose faces are turned toward him, and his ear hears the poor man's cry. The grim antithesis, which contains in itself the seeds of all unrest, is that the face of Jehovah, in other words, his manifest presence, the same face in the reflected light with which the faces of righteousness are lit with gladness and dawning glory, is set against the evildoer. The moral condition of the beholder determines the operation of the light of God's countenance upon him. For the same presence can be both light and darkness, life and death. Evil and its doers shrivel and perish in its beams, as the sunshine kills creatures whose haunt is the dark, or as Apollo's keen light arrows slew the monsters of the slime. All else follows on from this somewhat double relationship. The remainder of today's psalm runs out into a detailed description of the joyful fate of the lovers of good, broken only by the one tragic verse of 21, like a black rock in the midst of a sunny stream, showing us how evil and the evildoer end. In verse 17, like as in verse 5, The verb has no subject expressed, but the supplements that we find in the Authorized and Revised versions, the righteous, is implied from the context and can also be found in the 70th Psalm, whether as a part of the original text or as supplements thereto. The main thought of the last few verses is nothing more than the experiences of 4 to 7, thrown into the form of general principles. These are the commonplace of religion, but they come with a strange freshness to man when they have been verified by his life. Happy are they who can cast their personal experience into such proverbial sayings, and having by faith individualized the general promises, can generalize the individual experience. The psalmist does not here promise untroubled outward good. His anticipation is of troubled lives, after all, delivered because of crying out to Jehovah. Many may be the afflictions, but many more are the deliverances. Many are the blows, and painful is the pressure, but they break no bones, though they rack and wrench the frame. No permanent or lasting damage is done. Significant, too, is the sequence of synonyms we find here. Righteous, broken-hearted, crushed in spirit, servants, those who take refuge in Jehovah. The first of these refer to conduct, the second to the submission of will and spirit, which sorrow rightly brings about, substantially equivalent to the humble or the afflicted of verses 2 and 6. The third again deals mostly with practice, and the last touches upon the foundation of all service, submission and righteousness, as laid out in the act of faith in Jehovah. Our last pairing of verses 21 and 2 put the teaching of the psalm into one terrible contrast. Evil shall slay the wicked. If it were a mere platitude, if by evil were meant misfortune. The same thought of inseparable connections between the two senses of the word, which runs through our context, is expressed here in the most tense and brutal fashion. To do evil is to suffer evil, and all sin is suicide. The wages of sin is death. Every sin is a strand in the hangman's rope, which the sinner nooses round and puts over his own neck. That is so because every single sin brings guilt, and guilt brings retribution. Much more than desolate is meant in these verses. The word means to be condemned as guilty. Jehovah is the judge. Before his bar, all actions and characters are set. His unerring estimate of each brings with it here and now consequences of reward or punishment, which prophesy a future, more perfect judgment. The redemption of the soul of a servant of God is the antithesis of that awful experience, and they only who take refuge in him escape it. The full Christian experience of this final contrast is in the Apostles' words. There is therefore now no condemnation to those who are in Christ Jesus. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.